Hey everybody, here we are with another Thursday edition of Nowaskey Extreme Performance YouTube channel. As you guys all know, the change-ups continue, right? We have a lot of projects going on in the shop and a lot of product things that we want to talk to you guys about. And there's a topic that we get a lot of questions about, and I thought that it warranted a little bit longer video than our Tuesday Tech video. So I kind of wanted to insert this into our Thursday build series today, especially since our FXR project is going along nicely, but we just needed a little bit more time to get some pieces and parts together to keep that build moving. So again, I wanted to take a little extra time today to talk to you all about brakes. So again, we get a lot of questions about brakes, right? Like, why would I want floating rotors? Or what is the advantage of like a radial caliper? And then, what's the difference in master cylinders that are out there and different things like that. So in front of me here today, I have a braking system here. This is from a 2008 touring model, and it's the complete system here. And I just want to compare the upgraded components to the factory components so you can see what the difference is and understand why we like to upgrade brakes. So everybody knows that stopping is important. And we know all you guys are building bigger motors and doing all kinds of chassis upgrades to your bikes and suspension. So braking is very important, both to safety and your riding experience. So it's kind of nice. I'm sitting at the table here today, and I'm all comfortable. So I want to start by talking about brake rotors. Okay, so what is a floating rotor versus a standard rotor, and what are the advantages and why would we do it? So first of all, I have here in front of me, this is a factory Harley-Davidson brake rotor. As you can see, this is a one-piece rotor, and this is actually a hub mount rotor. So it bolts to the hub of your wheel. The other example I have here is a lug mount or an axial mount brake rotor. So the difference in the two stock rotors, first of all, is, as I just stated, this is a hub mount rotor that mounts directly to the hub. The axial mount or the lug mount rotor mounts to the wheel out on the spoke of the wheel, if you will. So actually, if we want to get technical about this is a semi-floating rotor because, as you can see, the holes are oblong here, and when you bolt it to the lug of the wheel, it does allow for the brake rotor to have a little bit of movement laterally and front to back, right? But the point is that the rotor has a little bit of movement on the wheel. But at the end of the day, it's considered a semi-floating rotor. So that's the biggest question we get. And on our website, we refer to this as axial mount and this as hub mount. So there you go. That's number one. And before I go any further, I want to let you guys know that I'm trying to put this in layman's terms, right? I'm not trying to get super technical because that just gets confusing, and this video is geared more towards the entry-level person with questions, not the big performance guy or the racer that wants to know the minor details. So this is the stock rotor and this is a floating rotor. So I'm going to set this one down because it's heavy. This one's significantly lighter, which is one of the first advantages. This is a lighter rotor. So the outer blade of the rotor is made of steel and the internal part of the rotor is made of aluminum. So that allows this rotor to be lighter, and that also decreases the unsprung weight, right? So your wheel and your brake rotor and all that is rolling on the ground. It's not part of the bike or the suspended or the sprung weight. Now, as you can see, there are all these buttons around the rotor, and if you look at the back, there's clips back here. So what that allows is a little bit of lateral movement of this rotor. So as your rotor heats up, your conventional rotor heats up, the heat on the outer edge of the rotor or the blade of the rotor is going to be significantly greater temperature than the center of the rotor. So what we get there is rotor deflection and warpage, right? It can, if you laid it like this, it would dish. Now, the floating rotor, the outer blade, the edge here is where the heat is. And by separating the blade of the rotor from the carrier of the rotor, the heat remains in the blade, and then with these buttons and wave washers, it allows this rotor to expand and contract without affecting the center of the rotor. Therefore, you don't get warpage in the rotor. And it dissipates heat better because you have air gap or increased air gap between the blade and the carrier. So this can heat up and cool down, expand and contract. It doesn't affect the rotor. It stays true longer. So what are the disadvantages of warpage or deflection in the rotor? Well, first of all, if the rotor is warping, it affects the contact of the pad to the rotor. So you're not getting maximum contact of that pad to the rotor because of the heat and the deflection. Well, then the rotor isn't aligned properly in between the pads also, so your brakes can feel spongy. So this basically, you know, again, the main reason is to allow for the heat, the expansion and the dissipation in that. The other thing with these is these rotors are fully rebuildable. So you can, you can take the blade off if it's worn over time and to put a new blade on. So it's just, it's a longer lifespan for the rotor. The rotor maintains its integrity longer and it improves the feel of the brake. So, and again, weight savings. So this is significantly lighter than this rotor. And I probably should put it on a scale, but I don't have it set in front of me. So that is some of the main advantages of the floating rotor. Now, I made some notes here because I really want to make sure I cover a few things for you. So, I talked about the heat tolerance, the alignment, the temp, the disc warpage, and the heat dissipation. And it's lighter, so hey, I covered all my points there. That's good, I'm doing good today. All right, now let's talk about radial calipers. Now, this is a radial caliper. Now, what makes this a radial caliper is how it mounts to your fork leg. So let's set this down and take a look at this. This is your factory brake caliper. So on this caliper setup, the bolts that connect it to the leg are parallel with the axle, okay? So when you apply your brakes, this allows for deflection of the caliper, okay? So this is your standard axial mount. It's been around for a long time. It works fine, but there's better options out there. So you might say, well, how much can this actually deflect, right? Well, even 1/10 of a millimeter of deflection could make your brakes feel spongy. So a radial caliper, the bolts are perpendicular to the axle, all right? So now when you apply the brakes, there is little to no opportunity for deflection. And you can look at this, right? You have a bolt here and here, whereas both bolts are in the front, and you can see how this could deflect. I'm exaggerating, right? But with this, the braking force and the rotational, it's not force, but the rotation of the rotor and the wheel are in line or working together. So this is going to give you a lot better feel. Now, I have a Brembo monoblock caliper in my hand here. I don't want this in the way. So the other thing about this Brembo caliper is cast from one single piece of aluminum. The only bolts in this caliper are the ones that hold it to your fork leg, and that's it. Or the banjo bolt that holds the brake line on, obviously. So this is a more simplified design. There's less opportunities for failures because, as you can see here, your stock caliper, this is actually a two-piece caliper. So you have hardware holding the caliper together. If you split this apart, there's O-rings in here. But this caliper is heavier because there's more hardware. There's also more failure opportunities there. So we have no opportunity for deflection here. Again, I'm looking at my notes again because I want to make sure I know this stuff, but it's hard when you're sitting on camera to remember it all sometimes. So the other benefit of this is that it allows in aftermarket applications opportunities to use different size rotors. It's much more simple, right? So if you were to put a larger brake rotor on a motorcycle using the stock caliper, then we add a bracket. So essentially what we're doing is we're moving that caliper further away from its mounting point. We end up with more opportunities for deflection there, and we still have the old style mount. Whereas with this, if you want to run a plus size rotor, all we need to do is put shims or spacers in here to just back the caliper up. But we don't lose that rigidity of the caliper to the fork. So again, you end up with a lot better feel here. So, and this kind of ties in with the caliper and the brake rotor. I'll touch on this. Like, why would I want an oversized rotor? Well, by increasing, I got a lot going on here, right? So by increasing the diameter of the rotor, you're increasing the mechanical advantage, okay? So as that rotor moves towards the tire, right, you have more mechanical advantage when that clamps on here to slow that down, to slow the motorcycle down. The smaller the rotor is, the harder it has to work to do that. So as far as you guys wanting to run oversized brakes and different things like that, Radial is the way to go because it's much, much simpler to add your oversized rotors, and then you're kind of unlimited, right? If you want a 11.5, 11.8, 12.6, 13, whatever it is, right? So that's the deal with the brake rotors. Now, another thing that doesn't get talked about very often is your master cylinder. So just like the brake caliper, we have what's referred to as an axial style master cylinder and a radial style master cylinder. Now, you might think, well, what's the difference here, right? I mean, so this is a factory one, this is an aftermarket master cylinder. So here's the difference. In this stock master cylinder, which works just fine, it's proven, it's been on motorcycles for years. So when you pull this lever this way, there is back here a tab on that lever that pushes a piston, that then pushes fluid down and compresses the calipers. I'm sure we don't need a lesson on that, right? But it's axial because the lever is moving towards me, but the piston is moving laterally. Now again, that works fine. But in a radial style caliper, you'll see here that the lever is, this is how it would go on the handlebars, right? I pull the lever and the piston, the master cylinder piston, is moving parallel or in line with the lever. So as you pull your fingers back, the piston is coming directly back. So what does that mean? Well, that means you're going to get better lever feel because everything is right in line with what you're doing. So that's the difference between a radial master cylinder and an axial master cylinder. And this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, and y'all might not even know that that's the difference in those two. So there's other factors that go into master cylinders as well. You know, the bore of the master cylinder and how much fluid you can move with it, but we won't go into all those details today. So, you know, these things, let me just stop for a second and say that in the history of brakes, once upon a time, we had drum brakes. So whether it's automotive or motorcycles, you had a drum brake. And, you know, basically that was a drum and you had all the mechanicals on the inside and it was mechanically operated to push that pad out against the drum. Well, the first biggest improvement in brakes was going from a drum to a disc style brake. So that was a major improvement in braking. So the next major improvement in braking was going from a mechanical system, which would consist of a cable or levers or mechanisms that controlled the braking. So brake systems went in automotive and in all transportation to hydraulic. So that was the next big improvement. So with hydraulic braking, with the size of the master cylinder and the pistons in the brake, or the amount of pistons in the brakes, because we have single piston, dual piston, 4 piston, 6 piston brakes. So there's a lot of thought that goes into that too, but the hydraulic advantage is that based on those sizes, you can add more pressure or force from the lever to the pad. So those were the two major improvements in braking. So I'm not gonna try to fool you here and say that these upgrades equal that, but we've really settled in on hydraulic brakes, and brakes probably won't change much from that because we've adopted that as the way to go about stopping. So these are smaller improvements. And so the focus has become the feel of the brakes, okay? So we've reached a point where the changes are a little more subtle, right? As we change to this or this or this, it's not gonna be like going from mechanical to hydraulic or drum to disc. So now we're trying to fine tune that braking experience, okay? So another thing, before I get too far on that is, and I don't want to spend a lot of time in this video talking about it, but is brake lines, okay? So when you're dealing with hydraulic pressure, brake line construction will matter. So your brake lines are typically made with, you know, steel wrap and then coated in that, and it's also your line can't expand with the master cylinder pressure, okay? So it all works together, all those fine improvements to make sure that your braking is crisp and consistent and you can feel it, okay? By doing these upgrades, you don't have that spongy feel. It's very much about the response of the brake and the feel of that brake. So a few other things that I would like to mention about brakes too that we're not going to go very far in depth with in this video is, now you probably know there's different materials for rotors, different sizes, which I touched on. Your brake pads, there's different compounds of the brake pad. There's different materials, if you will, in the brake rotor, you know, for its longevity. You have, you know, as you can see, this one has holes drilled in it versus slots in this. And I won't go into the science behind that because that's just gonna be a lot. And like I said, I wanted to keep this simple so you understand, but brake line construction and that is all going to improve the feel of your brakes. So I guess, just to recap, like what these things are, your floating rotor is lighter, it's gonna dissipate heat better, it's not going to warp or deflect, it's gonna stay aligned in the center of your brake pads in your caliper. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier, but you know, when your rotor starts to warp, you get brake drag. And it might be so minute that you can barely feel it. But when your brakes are dragging or your pad is dragging, has unnecessary pressure on the brake disc itself, it builds heat. And heat is the enemy of stopping power. We want reduced heat and a lightweight rotor that's rebuildable here. So that's the advantage of the floating rotor. And I'll tell you what, like this is always a big improvement. A floating brake rotor, if you were gonna do one thing sitting on this table, this is it, right here. I don't care what stock brakes, radial brakes, new brake, but I don't care what it is, this rotor is gonna be the #1 improvement for you. So your #2 improvement is going to be this radial caliper. And like I said, we have almost no opportunity for deflection with this, so it complements this floating rotor very well. So everything is running inline and clean and smooth, and when you pull that lever, your brakes are there and they feel good. And then, like I said too, for you performance guys, this is the way to be able to run oversized rotors in that. So upgrade #1, upgrade #2 here with the caliper, and last but not least, a proper master cylinder. And for you guys that want to take that brake feel to the next level, a Radial brake master cylinder is gonna be that third upgrade that you're gonna wanna do. And I guess I could touch on this for a moment too. With some of these aftermarket master cylinders, you have adjustable levers here. And so that allows for you to fine tune the lever placement and gives you a mechanical advantage when you're stopping. So some of us have short fingers, some people have long fingers, whatever. You can get that dialed in so you're confident and you have clean, crisp braking all the time. And then brake lines, which this is probably going to happen if you switch to radial calipers. You know, you're gonna wanna use a good brake line, and I suggest that you measure the lines properly. Less is more in this case. You want enough that your brake line can move with your suspension, right? Because as your wheel goes up and down, it needs to do this, but you wanna make sure that you have a quality line so that line doesn't expand or flex, and then that can reduce the feel as well. And all these things make your brakes feel spongy. So with that, I hope this video, one last thing. What does 108 millimeter mean? When you're looking at radial calipers, 108, so you guys are presumably Harley guys like us, right? But in the sport bike world, you have different brake calipers for different applications. So I'm not gonna say other numbers, but I'm gonna tell you what 108 millimeter means. So 108 millimeter radial caliper, when you're
1:36 p.m.
Hey, I know the time. All right, it's 108 millimeters from center of bolt hole to center of bolt hole. That's all it means. So that just allows you to get the right caliper for whatever fork leg you're using. But again, in the Harley world, we've all adapted this 108 millimeter caliper, and hopefully that cleared up a few things for you. And again, I tried to keep it simple. I didn't want to go make it too technical, but if you guys have questions, drop those questions in the comment section. I know this isn't the video you were expecting. You were expecting more FXR build, right? But I just really thought this was important, and I wanted to give you my time on that to help clear some of that stuff up. So there we have it. You can find these individual components at Nowaskey.com. We're working daily to try to put together brake line kits, to try to add these radial master cylinders on there, but it's a lot of work, and for the time being, we don't mind your emails and calls and inquiries about that, because we're glad to help you find what you need. So leave me questions in the comments, like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends. Again, these are the basics in radial brake components. So next Thursday, we're going to be back on that awesome FXR project, and we hope you stay tuned.